Welcome back to the A to Z of AV. Today's show we're going to talk about the letter C. What does the letter C stand for?
Control systems.
So what is a control system?
I'm glad you asked. A control system, I'm sure there will be many who disagree, is a single and centralized system or device that is capable of integrating with multiple third-party systems to provide end-user control and monitoring solutions through hardware and software interfaces.
So it's the Infinity Gauntlet that Thanos wore that had all the Power Stones in it.
Yeah, it basically does the same thing. It lets you do anything and everything from a single device or point or component.
So it's not necessarily the brains of the operation, it's just the pathway to communicate between all of the different elements of your smart home.
Yeah, it's a backbone that allows everything to be centrally managed.
All the tidy user interface.
Yeah, especially modern user interfaces. They are very tidy, very good looking, but that will be for the letter U. I will explore some user interfaces then, I think.
Cool.
Yeah.
What control systems do we normally use, first of all? Control 4 is one of them.
RTI. Oh, we're getting good at this. Savant.
Savant.
Crestron, which is kind of the granddaddy of control systems.
Elan.
Elan, which has a bumpy history. URC, which does stuff. And AMX, they used to do a very good residential control system, but they just don't do it anymore. So those are the mainstream control systems. Just to recap, that's Control 4, RTI, Savant, Crestron, Elan, URC and AMX. There are more, but their functionalities don't really stack up to those 7 quite as well as they should. There are a few DIY systems, we won't name them all, but you have ones like Harmony from Logitech, which I'm sure quite a few people have come across. Then there's Universal Remote. DemoPad, which I know for a fact is all controlled and set up through an iPad. Yeah, DIY systems if you're really on a tight budget.
It's more the kind of things that are made to make it easy for a general consumer to plug stuff in and have a play, but it doesn't have the functionality of a fully fledged professional control system. So it's not as customizable.
For instance, Logitech Harmony is very straightforward for getting, say, a TV and a skybox and a Blu-ray player and a big amplifier all working together without having to rely on 4 or 5 remotes, without having to fork out for a large system. It works well in that respect, just having a small single media zone or media room, if you like. So there are also a few systems which I don't think we would recommend meddling with. For starters, you have to be like a serious hardcore geek to even know about or have any interest in these, like OpenHub, CalOS and Home Assistant, purely because they require a lot of tech know-how to get up and running, like building your own computer, installing the software from scratch and doing some scripting and coding just to be able to say, TV, turn on.
I mean, it's hard enough just to install Windows properly.
None of them run on Windows, so you're out of luck there. If you think that Windows is the only thing that runs on the computer, ignore those last 3 things I just mentioned there. Carry on with life. It won't affect or change anything.
There are some other control systems that most people would be familiar with.
You say familiar. If you mention Apple HomeKit to anyone who's an avid iPhone and iPad user, do they know what you're talking about?
Not necessarily.
Yeah.
I don't really know what it does. So.
You've got a MacBook, right?
I have got a
So
MacBook.
you can use that as the central processor for an Apple HomeKit system. But again, they fall into the category of one of those systems that you need a lot of technological know-how to get them up and running. There are some more modern systems that the likes of Google and Amazon are trying to inflict on everyone. Like Google Google Assistant and Amazon Alexa. It's mostly geared towards voice control, but you can set up some home automation and basic multimedia control, although not quite at the level of an accepted standard for control systems.
No, they have a lot more limitation than
Yeah.
a control system that we would look at or entertain. We've talked about control systems, but like, what do they do? How do they control stuff? So how do control systems control systems?
Michael, you've just found the loophole there. How do control systems control stuff? Infrared, that's all there is to it.
Infrared, I mean, that's old technology.
Michael, can you list me some control methods that
Yes.
control systems use?
Yes.
Awesome.
So there's IR,
Which stands for...
infrared.
Infrared is like what your traditional TV or Sky or DVD player remote would use. A lot of aircon units still use infrared remote as well. Projectors, amplifiers. Control systems are capable of mimicking those remotes over wires and then having small infrared emitters that are stuck onto the front of be it a TV or DVD player, and it just sends the signal over the wire to this little emitter which emits infrared light, so you can't physically see it, but the TV or the end device does see it, and it reacts as if you're using the normal remote.
But with those, we tend to see a horrible stuck-on little bug thing in front of a TV that when you're spending a lot of money on a system, you don't really, you care about aesthetics. The last thing we'd want to do is stick a bug on the front of a TV that flashes away. It's just ugly. There is another control protocol that we like to use called IP,
Which stands for...
Internet Protocol.
which is basically control over the internet. The name's a little confusing. So it's control using the internet protocol, but it doesn't necessarily have to be across the whole wide web or the internet. It simply uses the same technology that computers or mobile phones and web servers talk to each other to control systems in a local device. So you'd have a control system that's connected via IP or through the network to, say, a TV or a projector or an AV receiver, and it just sends digital messages over the network, broadcasts it directly to the device and says to it, turn on, turn the volume up, select a different input, turn the volume down, etc.
The beauty of this is you don't have to have anything visible, because 9 times out of 10, actually 10 times out of 10, the Ethernet port is somewhere you can't see it on the device, so it's plugged in and you don't see it. There's no flashing or anything.
For us, it's the preferred control method for devices because it means there is physically less cabling required to reach the end goal of having a controlled system.
So there's serial control?
Yeah, so serial control comes in a variety of flavours, but don't eat it. They generally have some sort of a number attached to them, so the most popular is RS232. The majority of serial control is just end-to-end or single device control, so you have a controlling device and a controlled device, and generally controls are sent over 2 wires, so you have your signal and ground, or if it's 3 wire control, so you essentially have a return like a feedback connection, so signal, feedback and ground. And then you can have serial bus connections where you basically have multiple devices, 50, 60, sometimes 100 devices on a single cable, like lighting keypads for instance, like Lutron systems. They use a similar protocol to RS485. Any one of the keypads can communicate with the main system and vice versa at any time, and basically what it does is constantly messages are being sent round and the correct device just picks up the message assigned to it.
So how about controlling stuff without wires?
Zigbee or Z-Wave, there are a few other ones, but those two seem to be the ones that have been the most prolific. They are very low power, they only send short messages in short bursts, so usually they are fairly reliable. Alternatively, you can have longer distance communications, so RF, like for garage doors for instance, where you would have, be it a contact switch, many tens or hundreds of yards away from your control system, and at your control system you have a little antenna that beams out the signal to the end device and just tells it to open, close, turn on, turn off, etc. And the same works for wireless lighting keypads, for instance. They use Zigbee, like Control 4 ones do, where they just send short messages. For instance, if you've got 2 buttons on the keypad, you'd have, say, a command for the lights on. It would just send lights on to the control system, and the control system takes care of the grunt work of actually managing the lighting system.
Are there any other control methods that we can use that send a very simple message to dumb devices that just look for, I don't know, a circuit?
Yes or no. Yeah. Garage doors would be a prime example. So garage doors, gates, like driveway gates, pedestrian access gates, etc. Projector lifts, blinds. Sometimes they just require a simple message that tells it to activate. And this can be done in a number of ways. The most common being, you just have a relay. It's like a switch, it completes the circuit, power flows, lights come on, everyone's happy.
What part of the control system do users actually see and care about and interact with? Because that's the most important thing, right?
It is, and that's the user interface. Like I said, be that hardware or software. So hardware would be a physical remote, and software would be an app on a phone or an iPad or a touchscreen, for instance.
Shall we have a look at some of the connectors that we use? So this is a very old control processor, as you can tell by some of these analog connectors.
Yeah, there's no digital.
A lot of these we don't use anymore.
These connectors at the top, they are the infrared outputs. Just below them are some 9-pin or DB9 RS232 connectors, or they can also be used for RS422. These little latches down here, they are the dry contacts. There's one relay here and a couple of sensor inputs. There's the network port for connecting the device to a network for IP control of devices. Thank you for tuning in once again to our A to Z of AV videos, and today we were exploring the letter C, which stands for control systems. So next week we are...
I don't know what we're doing next week. The next letter is going to be D, which stands for...
data. And everything around data.